The wood of the courtroom bench felt cold beneath my palms. My heart was pounding so hard I thought the judge might hear it. The air was still, heavy, like everyone in that room was holding their breath at the same time. Across from me sat Jessica, my daughter, perfect hair, flawless suit, calm face, like the last 11 years had been nothing but a little misunderstanding. Next to her, a lawyer with a leather briefcase. The kind of man who spoke softly because he was used to winning. On our side of the table, our lawyer leaned toward me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "We might lose." My stomach dropped. Marcus sat beside me, back straight, eyes steady, the way he always was. 19 years old, but still the boy I raised from the moment his mother left him on my porch. Everyone in this room thought he was the weak one, the autistic boy who didn't talk much, but I knew better. I grabbed his hand under the table. "Marcus," I whispered, "they have everything." He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just leaned closer, his voice so calm it cut through my panic. "Just let her talk." I stared at him. My daughter's lawyer was ready to rip our lives apart. Our own lawyer had just told me we might lose everything, the money, the guardianship, the years we'd built together. And my grandson wanted me to let her talk? Jessica shifted in her chair, lips already curving into that confident little smile I remembered too well. The kind that said she'd already won. The judge called the court to order, and the clerk began to read the case. I squeezed Marcus's hand once more, desperate for a sign, any sign that he understood what was at stake. But he just sat there, perfectly still, like a storm was brewing behind his quiet eyes. And in that moment, I didn't know what scared me more, the thought of losing everything, or the terrifying calm on my grandson's face. This was no ordinary case. This was the day everything would be decided. It was a cold February morning in 2013 when everything changed. I still remember the knock on my front door, quick, sharp, like someone who had no intention of staying. When I opened it, Jessica stood there with Marcus by her side. My grandson was only 8 years old then, tiny and withdrawn, clutching the strap of a small red backpack like it was the only thing tethering him to the world. Jessica was wearing her usual heels, sunglasses perched on her head even though the sky was gray. "Mom," she said, shifting from foot to foot, "I need a break, just for the weekend." Her voice was light, like she was dropping off groceries, not her own child. "Jessica, what's going on?" I asked, glancing down at Marcus. He wasn't looking at me. His hands were pressed tightly against his ears, his body rocking gently back and forth. She bent down, kissed the top of his head without really touching him, and straightened her coat. "I'll pick him up Sunday night. I promise." "Wait, Jessica." But she was already walking back to the car, the sound of her heels sharp against the concrete. She didn't look back. The car door slammed, the engine started, and a moment later, she disappeared down the street. I stood there, one hand still on the open door, the other pressed against my chest. Marcus was on the porch, still rocking, his eyes fixed on the ground. "Hey," I whispered softly, kneeling down to his level. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe here." He didn't respond. I reached out slowly, remembering what the therapist had told Jessica once. "Don't rush him. Let him come to you." So, I didn't. I just sat there on the porch with him, letting the cold air wrap around us both. The day dragged on in silence. He wouldn't eat anything I offered, wouldn't let me help him with his shoes. At bedtime, he hummed quietly the same note, over and over. I lay awake that night, listening to the soft sound through the walls, wondering when Jessica would call. She didn't. Saturday came and went. Sunday, too. No call, no text, no knock on the door. Just me and Marcus, a little boy who didn't speak, and a grandmother who didn't yet know how to reach him. When Monday morning came, I packed his backpack with the same clothes he arrived in. But deep down, I knew she wasn't coming. That was the weekend that never ended. The weekend I stopped being just a grandmother and became a mother again. The first night was the longest night of my life. I laid out a small bed for Marcus in the guest room, folded the blanket just the way I used to when Jessica was little. But the moment I turned off the light, his humming grew louder. Not the kind of humming you can sleep through. It was sharp, insistent, almost like a shield against the world. I got up 3 times. First, to check if he was okay. Second, because I thought maybe he was cold. Third, because I didn't know what else to do. He sat cross-legged on the bed, hands over his ears, rocking slowly, eyes fixed on the nightstand lamp I'd left on. "Marcus," I whispered from the doorway. "Are you okay?" He didn't move, didn't blink. The sound just kept filling the room, soft but relentless. I leaned against the doorframe and realized how truly unprepared I was. The next morning, I tried making pancakes the way Jessica liked them when she was his age, extra syrup, no butter. I placed the plate in front of him at the kitchen table. He didn't even glance at it. He just stared at the cup of water I'd set beside it. "Do you want orange juice instead?" I asked. He shoved the plate away so hard the syrup spilled over the edge of the table. I froze. He scrambled off the chair, hands flying to his ears again. I tried to reach for him, to calm him, but he screamed high and sharp, a sound that sliced through me. That was the first meltdown. I sat on the kitchen floor afterward, shaking, syrup still dripping from the table, wondering how on earth I was going to do this. I was 70. I didn't have a manual. And my daughter wasn't calling. Days blurred together. I learned the patterns of his world before I even realized I was learning them. The blue plastic cup was the only one he'd drink from. The left side of the couch was his spot. The hums changed pitch when he was calm versus when he was overwhelmed. The calls to Jessica went unanswered. Saturday, Sunday, Monday. A week became 2. By the 3rd week, we were sitting together on the porch. He was still rocking, still distant. But that day, he glanced up, just for a second. Our eyes met. It wasn't a smile. It wasn't trust, not yet. But it was a beginning. I didn't say anything. I just sat there with him as the afternoon light spilled across the porch, listening to the sound of his humming blend with the wind. It wasn't easy. It wasn't soft. But slowly, I was learning his language. It was Christmas Eve, 2013. The house smelled like cinnamon and sugar cookies, just the way it used to when Jessica was a little girl. I'd spent the whole afternoon trying to create something warm, something steady. Marcus was sitting in the living room, rocking softly in front of the small Christmas tree I'd set up just for him. The lights blinked, slow, steady. He liked it that way. I'd told myself that night would be different. I told myself Jessica would call. She had to. A mother couldn't just walk away forever, could she? When the phone rang, I nearly dropped the tray of cookies. "Jessica! Thank God." "When are you?" I started, already reaching for my keys, imagining the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. But her voice was brittle, a crack running straight through the middle of it. "I can't do this anymore, Mom." My heart stopped. "Jessica, what are you talking about?" "He's yours," she whispered. I tried. I really tried. But I can't. "Jessica, don't you dare." My voice broke before I could finish. The line went dead. I stared at the phone like it might start talking on its own. I called her back once, twice, 5 times, straight to voicemail. I sent messages. Nothing. I even drove past her old apartment. It was empty. She was gone. When I got home, the cookies were burned. The kitchen smelled like bitter sugar, not Christmas. I slid down against the counter, the phone still in my hand, and let the silence swallow me whole. For the first time, I admitted what I'd known all along. She wasn't coming back. Then I heard its soft footsteps padding across the kitchen floor. Marcus stood in the doorway in his little red pajamas, clutching that same blue cup. For weeks, he had avoided looking at me, but now, he did. A long, quiet stare. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just crossed the room, placed the cup carefully on the floor next to me, and went back to the living room. Something inside me cracked open, I wasn't just his grandmother anymore. I was the only person left. I pulled the tray of ruined cookies onto my lap and let the tears fall until I couldn't cry anymore. Outside, snow was starting to cover the front porch where Jessica had last stood. That night, something shifted in both of us. She'd abandoned him, but I wouldn't. The years that followed weren't easy. Raising Marcus was never a straight road. It was winding, full of sharp turns and quiet victories no one else saw. He was 8 when Jessica left. By the time he turned 12, the world had already tried to put him in a box. I remember sitting in the principal's office for the 3rd time that month. The woman folded her hands like she was trying to keep her patience from slipping. "Mrs. Miller, Marcus would be better served in a special needs classroom. He doesn't participate. He covers his ears. He doesn't engage." I leaned forward. "He reads at a 7th grade level. He's 8. Her smile tightened. "Yes, but he doesn't interact." "Maybe you're not speaking his language," I snapped. The meetings kept coming. They called it inclusion, but what they meant was containment. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't notice the way he lined his toy cars by the shade of red, each one arranged from lightest to darkest. Or how he pointed out the traffic light on Oak Street was mistimed by exactly 7 seconds. Or how he'd correct the cashier when the total was off by a single cent. He saw patterns in everything. When he was 10, we were at the grocery store when he suddenly froze near the checkout line. I thought he was overwhelmed by the noise. Instead, he pointed to the screen. "The scanner skipped the bread," he said quietly. The cashier blinked. "What?" he repeated, slower. "The scanner skipped the bread." She checked the receipt. He was right. I'll never forget the way the woman's face changed as she looked at him not with pity, but with something close to respect. But the biggest moment came one rainy morning at breakfast. 3 years of near silence, of hums and gestures and long stares. I was flipping pancakes when I heard it. "Why did Mom leave?" I dropped the spatula. The sound of it hitting the floor startled us both. I turned slowly. He was looking right at me. "She said she couldn't handle it," I whispered. He nodded once, reached for his notebook, wrote something down, and went quiet again. It wasn't a meltdown. It wasn't a panic. It was just a boy filing away the truth. From then on, I noticed it more. The way he watched the world like it was a puzzle he was determined to solve. He didn't waste words, so when he spoke, it mattered. One night, after a difficult day at school, I found him on the living room floor surrounded by sheets of paper. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Counting." "Counting what?" "Patterns." The papers were covered in grids, numbers, lines connecting different shapes. It didn't make sense to me, but it made perfect sense to him. And somewhere between late-night humming and early morning stares, something shifted. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building something inside that quiet mind of his. And I, an old woman who thought her life was nearly settled, was witnessing a storm that no one else saw coming. It started small. A few questions at the kitchen table. "Do you have my birth certificate? Can I see my school enrollment papers? Where are the calendars from 2013? At first, I thought it was just curiosity. Teenagers want to know things. But Marcus didn't just ask, he archived. Every answer I gave, every paper I pulled out of drawers, he scanned, categorized, and stored with military precision. By the time he was 13, the old family computer wasn't enough. He had saved every medical record, every insurance form, every phone bill I'd kept. He even cataloged his old therapy progress sheets like pieces of evidence. One afternoon, I stood at the doorway to his room, watching the glow from 3 monitors spill across his face. Code scrolled down faster than I could read. His fingers moved with a kind of stillness, not rushed, not frantic, just certain, like he already knew the shape of the world he was building. "Marcus," I said softly, "what are you doing?" He didn't turn around, making sure nothing gets lost. "What does that mean?" "People lie," he said calmly. "Documents don't. It hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't just coding for fun. He was preparing. Over the next few years, our little garage turned into a digital fortress. I'd walk in at midnight with a sandwich, and he'd barely look up. The hum of the old desktop filled the night, layered over the soft chirp of cicadas outside. He built his first real system at 15. It checks if files have been changed, he explained, pulling up a screen full of graphs. Every document has a digital fingerprint. If someone alters it, the fingerprint changes. Why would someone change a document? He paused, eyes flicking toward the ceiling. Because people rewrite the past. The weight of those words sank into me like cold water. He was talking about his mother. Even though he never said her name, I knew. When most kids his age were sneaking out to parties or staying up playing video games, Marcus was digging through old boxes, scanning faded receipts, mapping out the history of a life most people wanted to forget. He was building something bigger than either of us realized. He called it the Timeline Project. Every record, every date, every transaction we'd ever had was indexed, time-stamped, cross-verified. The system didn't just store data, it could flag discrepancies. If something didn't match reality, it lit up like a flare. "Why are you doing all this?" I asked one night. He looked at me with those clear, still eyes. "Because one day, someone's going to lie. And I want the truth ready." I didn't know then just how right he would be. By 16, he'd learned enough coding languages to make the project self-sustaining. Python, Java, Rust. Words I didn't even understand filled our house like a second language. I remember standing in that garage one night, watching him work under the faint yellow light. He wasn't just my grandson anymore. He was becoming something sharper, quieter, and far more powerful than anyone had expected. He didn't build it for glory. He didn't build it for money. He built it to protect the truth. And one day, that truth would save us both. Marcus never bragged. Not when he solved puzzles other people couldn't. Not when he built software that could detect forgery faster than trained investigators. Not even when he landed his first client. He was 16. A small cybersecurity firm down in Florida had heard about the Autistic kid with the verification software through a friend of a friend. They didn't expect much, just wanted to test it out. Marcus spent 2 days on a call with their lead engineer, never once raising his voice. When the deal closed, he walked into the kitchen like nothing happened. "I was making dinner. Grandma," he said softly. "They paid. How much?" He slid a folded check across the table. $20,000. My knees nearly gave out. "I thought it was just a project," I whispered. He shrugged. "They wanted the system. That was only the beginning." In less than 6 months, 5 more companies reached out. His system could detect even the smallest digital forgery down to the millisecond a document was altered. Law firms, private investigators, security agencies, they all wanted in. We went from a quiet house with blinking monitors to signing contracts at our dining table. I hired a lawyer to make sure no one could take advantage of him. He didn't care about the money. He only cared about refining the system. He worked through the nights, headphones on, 3 screens glowing in the dark. Sometimes I'd find him asleep in his chair, fingers still resting on the keyboard, the hum of the servers like a lullaby. At 17, he had clients in 4 states. At 18, he had 2 acquisition offers on the table. And at 19, the number written on the contract was larger than anything I'd ever imagined. $4.2 million. I remember sitting in that lawyer's office, staring at the papers. "Marcus," I said carefully, "this is a lot of money." He nodded. "I know. You understand what this means?" He tilted his head. "I don't want to run a company. I just want to build things." So we sold it. One clean deal. Full transfer. And just like that, the boy everyone had doubted was a millionaire. The story spread fast. Local news stations picked it up first. Local autistic teen develops revolutionary document security software. The cameras showed up. The microphones, the headlines. People who had whispered behind our backs when he was little suddenly called him brilliant and remarkable. But Marcus didn't care about any of that. He just sat through the interviews, polite and quiet, answering questions with the same calm he always had. "What inspired you to create this system?" one reporter asked. He glanced at me, then back at her. "People lie. Documents don't." She didn't understand the weight of it, but I did. That night, I watched him sit alone in the living room, the glow of his laptop lighting up his face. No celebration, no champagne, just him and the quiet. He'd spent years building a weapon of truth, and the world had just handed him a platform. I didn't know it then, but that spotlight would pull someone back into our lives, someone who had once walked away. 2 weeks after the local news aired the story, the doorbell rang. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The sun was dipping low, slanting gold through the kitchen window. I was stirring a pot of soup when I heard it 2 soft chimes, then silence. Marcus was in the living room, scrolling through something on his laptop. He didn't move. He never rushed to answer the door. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked down the hallway. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. Jessica. She stood on the porch like she owned it, polished hair, tailored gray suit, designer heels. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Next to her was a man in a charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "Hi, Mom." For a moment, the years fell away. I saw the girl I'd raised and the woman who'd walked out. My fingers tightened on the doorknob. "What do you want, Jessica?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. The man stepped forward first. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Miller. I'm Stephen Walsh, Mrs. Cooper's attorney. We'd like to speak with you about Marcus's situation." Marcus's situation. Not her son, not our family. A situation. My stomach turned cold. His situation. Jessica adjusted her jacket, the same way she always did when she wanted to look in control. "Can we come in? This is important." Before I could answer, Marcus appeared behind me. No sound, just his quiet presence. He stood in the doorway, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, eyes fixed on Jessica like he was watching a stranger. "Marcus," she said softly, trying to smile. "Hi, sweetheart." Nothing. No flicker of recognition, no response. Just silence. I wanted to slam the door, to protect him from whatever storm she was bringing with her. But Marcus spoke first. "Come in." His voice was calm, flat, like a scientist observing a test he already knew the outcome of. We sat around the kitchen table that had carried every scar of our shared life, coffee rings, scratch marks, the dent from his first meltdown. Now, it was a battlefield. The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out a neat stack of documents. "We're here to discuss custody and financial guardianship," he began smoothly. "My client wishes to resume active parental involvement." I felt my throat tighten. "Custody? He's 19. Jessica smiled, soft and rehearsed. "I never gave up my rights." I glanced at Marcus, waiting for a reaction. But he just sat there, watching her, completely still, like a storm gathering under glass. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. It was the kind of air that made your chest tighten before you even sat down. Rows of wooden benches stretched out behind us, filled with murmuring strangers and curious faces. Marcus walked beside me in silence, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, earbuds tucked away. He didn't need music. His calm was something deeper than sound. I, on the other hand, was barely holding it together. Our lawyer, Linda Reyes, met us outside the courtroom doors. She had tired eyes and a thin folder clutched to her chest. "I'll be honest with you," she said quietly. "She has strong documentation. If the judge believes it's legitimate, she could get financial guardianship until he's 21. My heart clenched. "But she hasn't been here for 11 years. "I know." Linda's voice softened. But what matters in this courtroom isn't what we know, it's what we can prove. She pushed open the doors, and we stepped into the room that would decide everything. Jessica was already there. She looked like she'd been waiting for this day her whole life. Perfect posture, silk blouse, soft gray sweater that made her look maternal. Beside her, Walsh, the lawyer, leaned forward with a calm smile that screamed confidence. A thick stack of documents sat neatly in front of him, like weapons laid out for war. The bailiff called the case. Everyone rose as Judge Harrison entered, black robe flowing, his expression unreadable. "Be seated." The hearing began. Jessica's testimony. Walsh started smoothly. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Jessica Cooper, has maintained consistent parental rights over her son Marcus Miller. She has provided support through documented means and wishes to assume financial guardianship to ensure his best interests are protected." I clenched my hands in my lap. Jessica's voice was steady, soft, almost convincing. "I know I wasn't there every day," she said, tears glimmering perfectly in the corners of her eyes. "But I did what I could. I visited when possible. I sent money through money orders. I made sure my mother took good care of him." She began listing dates like she had memorized them for months. December 2012, April 2014, September 2016. She painted herself as a struggling single mother who stayed connected from the shadows. The gallery leaned in. People love redemption stories. But I sat there gripping the edge of the bench, my pulse hammering in my ears. She even described a Christmas visit in 2013 that never happened. She said she brought presents, that Marcus smiled at her, that we spent the day together as a family. Every word was a knife. Our turn. Linda stood, firm but measured. She laid out my binders, years of therapy notes, school records, doctor visits, everything I had. "Your Honor, this evidence clearly shows that Dorothy Miller was the sole caretaker of Marcus from the age of 8. She attended every school meeting, therapy appointment, and medical consultation. There's no record of Mrs. Cooper participating in any of these." The judge flipped through the documents, nodding occasionally but not showing what he thought. Walsh smirked slightly. "That may be true, Your Honor, but absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. My client did provide financial and emotional support. We have notarized records to prove it." He held up his neat stack, glossy, crisp, legal-looking, the kind of papers that could bury the truth under ink and signatures. "The judge speaks." "Miss Reyes," Judge Harrison said, looking up. "I see no formal guardianship paperwork here. No court order. No legal termination of parental rights." The words hit me like a blow. I hadn't filed anything. Back then, I'd just taken him in and raised him. I'd been too busy keeping him fed, safe, alive to think about the paperwork that might one day protect us. Jessica shifted in her chair, her lawyer whispering something that made her lips curl at the corners. She thought she'd already won. "Without evidence of formal guardianship," the judge continued, "Mrs. Cooper's legal claim has standing." The room tilted for a moment. My breath went shallow. We might actually lose him, not his body, but his future, his hard-earned independence, his life's work. Linda leaned close. "We still have a chance, but it's going to be tough." I glanced at Marcus. He hadn't moved. No panic, no fear, just stillness. "Marcus," I whispered, "what do we do?" He turned to me, eyes calm as a steady sea. "Just let her talk." Cross-examination. Linda rose again, this time sharper. "Mrs. Cooper, can you tell us how many therapy sessions you attended between 2013 and 2015? Jessica hesitated. Just a flicker. "I trusted my mother to handle that part. And school meetings? The same. Phone calls to Marcus? Emails? Texts? I didn't want to overwhelm him." Linda pressed harder. "You claim you visited December 2013. Can you describe what gift you brought?" Jessica smiled gently. "Perfectly rehearsed. A blue RC car. He loved it. I almost laughed. The only blue thing he loved that Christmas was a plastic cup, but the judge was watching her. And without hard evidence, a well-told lie can look just like the truth. Marcus takes the stand. "Mr. Miller," Judge Harrison said, "would you like to speak?" For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then Marcus stood, straight-backed, calm. He walked to the stand, laptop bag slung over his shoulder like it belonged there. "Yes, Your Honor. You may proceed." He placed the laptop on the witness stand, connected it to the courtroom display. Walsh jumped up. "Your Honor, this is irregular." "Sit down, counselor," the judge said. Marcus clicked a few keys. The courtroom screen filled with clean lines of data, timestamp logs, and scanned documents. His voice was even steady, like he'd rehearsed it in his mind 1,000 times. "These are the documents my mother submitted. According to their metadata, they were created 6 weeks ago, not 11 years. The judge leaned forward. Walsh stiffened. Marcus continued. "Each file has a digital fingerprint. If the file is altered or forged, the fingerprint changes. These fingerprints show all her documents were generated after the news story aired." He pulled up overlays, timestamps, hashed codes, verification reports. No emotion, just truth. "Additionally," he said, "these signatures don't match her verified signature from 2012. Letter spacing and pressure pattern analysis confirm forgery." The gallery whispered. Walsh's face reddened. Jessica shifted in her seat, her composure starting to crack. Marcus tapped again, and a timeline spread across the screen. Every year of his life documented photos, scanned receipts, therapy logs, school attendance, appointment calendars. "My grandmother documented everything," he said. "She never filed for legal guardianship because she didn't think she had to. But the truth is still here." He zoomed into December 2013. "She claims she visited me that Christmas. Here's our calendar. Here's my therapy session from December 24th. Here's the receipt for the pizza we ordered that night. No visitors? No phone calls? No RC car." He switched to phone records, then bank statements. "She claims she sent money orders. No transactions exist between her account and ours. None. Not one. Click, click, click." Every lie she told, he destroyed with surgical precision. Judge Harrison looked at her. "Mrs. Cooper, can you explain these discrepancies?" Jessica's voice wavered for the first time. "The system could be wrong. He's just a kid." "He built the system," Walsh muttered, voice tight. The judge raised a brow. "Answer the question." I was there," she stammered. "I remember being there. Maybe the records are wrong. Do you have any proof?" She looked down at her manicured hands. "No. Then why should this court believe you?" Her silence was the loudest thing in the room. The verdict. Judge Harrison sat back, his eyes steady. "I've seen enough." He spoke slowly, clearly, his words cutting through the tension like a blade. "Mrs. Cooper, your testimony is inconsistent and unsupported. The evidence presented by Marcus Miller conclusively proves document forgery and fabrication. Full custody and financial guardianship remain with Dorothy Miller. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation into perjury and fraud." Jessica inhaled sharply, but the sound that came out was somewhere between a sob and a gasp. "This hearing is adjourned." The gavel struck like thunder. As people began to shuffle out, Marcus just stood there. No fist pump, no smile, just quiet victory. I reached for his hand, the same way I had on that porch 11 years ago when his mother drove away. He looked at me not as the scared little boy he once was, but as a young man who had just defended the life we built together. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't have to. His truth had spoken loud enough for everyone to hear. 6 months passed. Life after the courtroom wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was steady, like the slow rhythm of breathing after holding your breath too long. Marcus had moved into his own small apartment a few blocks away. It wasn't fancy, just 2 rooms and a big desk against the window, but it was his. He couldn't work in document verification anymore. Non-compete clause. So he built something new. "I'm starting a software testing company," he told me one evening over dinner. "But I'm not hiring just anyone. I want people like me. People who see what others miss." His first hire was David, one of my former students from 20 years ago. David was autistic too. The world had written him off. Marcus didn't. He made David the lead quality tester. Then came Sarah. Then Miguel. And slowly, a small team formed quiet, brilliant minds who finally had a place built for them, not around them. One afternoon, as I dropped off homemade lasagna at his office, I paused at the doorway. There they were, Marcus and his team heads bent over monitors, deep in their world. No one there was trying to be normal. They were just themselves, and it was enough. Jessica's sentence. Jessica didn't walk away untouched. The court sentenced her to 2 years of probation and 500 hours of community service at an autism resource center. 3 months in, I stopped by the center to donate some materials. I didn't expect to see her there, sitting on the floor, reading softly to a small group of non-verbal children. No designer heels, no makeup, no power suit. For a second, our eyes met. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. There was a humility in her face I hadn't seen in years, maybe ever. The director smiled, unaware of who I was. "That volunteer," she whispered, "comes in extra hours. She's learning a lot." I left without a word. Some things don't need to be spoken. Tuesday evening. I walked into Marcus's apartment with a bag of groceries like I always did. The place was quiet, calm. The blue plastic cup, the same one from that porch 11 years ago, sat on the counter, chipped at the rim. Still his favorite. We sat at the small table and ate. No big speeches, just soft clinking of forks and the quiet warmth of routine. Then he put his phone down, looked at his hands for a moment. "Grandma," he said softly, "I know what you gave up for me." I didn't speak. I let him keep going. "Your friends stopped calling. You missed trips. You stayed. You didn't have to, but you did." My throat tightened. "You could have sent me away," he whispered. "But you didn't." I reached out not to hold, just to be near. "You were worth every single day." He nodded once. That was enough. Later that night, driving home, my phone buzzed at a red light. A message from Marcus. "Thank you." Just 2 words. But they were heavier and more beautiful than any verdict. Not all stories end with revenge. Some end with truth. Some with quiet victories. And some with a chipped blue cup that meant more than anyone could understand. If you were in my shoes, could you forgive? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove love can be stronger than blood.